Hello, welcome to our Nasco webinar today. We're talking about social emotional learning and mental health, specifically trauma-informed work. And I'm joined today by Lisa Dunham, and I'll tell you a little bit about her. We'll start today with a little bit of an introduction to Lisa, so you learn more about her work. We'll also then do a little bit of a conversation with her before she takes over and talks a lot about mental wellness in schools and really making sure that she's targeting this conversation to teachers, to people who are in the building doing amazing things with students. And then we'll also talk a little bit about a couple of products that kind of reinforce the ideas that Lisa's sharing today before we wrap up. There are many opportunities to ask questions. There's a question box, so please, if you have questions, type it in the question box. As Lisa is presenting, I will be kind of voicing some of your questions to her because we have a number of people on the webinar. We just have that question box available to us, but we'll be monitoring that closely to share any questions you may have as we go. So please do interact with us today. And I also want to thank you for joining us. I know that it's the end of the school year, an end of a really hard school year, and a really kind of traumatic few months with a lot going on in mental health and public health. And so I appreciate the time that you're taking today to have a conversation with us about mental wellness because it seems now even more than normal, it's a really important topic for us all to be talking about, but especially for us to be talking about with our youth. So thank you for taking some time today to join us. So a little bit about Lisa Dunham. Lisa is a licensed clinical social worker, and she received her master's in social work from UW-Milwaukee in Wisconsin in 2007, and she has since enjoyed working in child welfare, inpatient mental health, day treatment, and community mental health. She is currently a CCS supervisor at Jefferson County Human Services in Wisconsin, providing clinical supervision to therapists and counselors who work with children and teens with mental health diagnoses within the county area. Lisa is certified in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy and has received intensive training in behavioral therapy. She enjoys providing community trainings on trauma-informed and resilience-oriented approaches to organizations such as schools, medical practitioners, and law enforcement. So we're really lucky to have Lisa join Nasco today. And I'm going to explain a little bit about what Nasco is, but as I'm talking, we're also going to take a poll, because one of the things that Lisa especially wanted to make sure, and we wanted to make sure, is that we get a picture of really who's in the room with us and what grades you teach. So if you can please take that poll, it will allow us to make sure that the examples we share are useful for the teachers who are on the line today. So please take that poll, fill it out, and we will be able to use that today. Now, as you're looking at that, Nasco is a solutions company. We are a company that looks to help teachers and ultimately are trying to make connections and provide solutions to challenges that our teachers and our students are facing. So things like social emotional learning as a hot topic is one of the areas that we're spending a lot of time right now and energy making sure that we're trying to get our resources to teachers who are looking for them across the country. And we are also a company that works a lot with hands-on learning as well as digital learning. So we've got digital solutions like NascoEducate.com, which has a ton of free content right now that helps teachers kind of save a little bit of time in their lesson planning. And we also are a kit company. So we have a lot of hands-on learning opportunities that will allow you to save time, kind of click as a bundle, and really focus in on your students with hands-on learning and unplugged and plugged in resources. So Nasco offers a lot of different things, and we have for decades to teachers. So we're really excited for this new venue that we're doing with our webinars and having conversations with you all on a regular basis. We do a couple of webinars a week, and Lisa joining us today is just the next in a series of webinars that we do on social emotional learning, on health, and on so many other topics as well. So please do keep an eye on our list. So I wanted to show the results of those polls and see kind of who's in the room with us today. And I'm just going to look at those quickly. So we have the majority of our people today are 3-5 teachers, about 37%, followed by 32% teaching kindergarten to second grade, 6th to 8th grade, we've got 26% of teachers, and then 9th to 12th grade, we've got 16%. So we have a really nice kind of mixture with a kind of a focus on that K-8 though, especially, which then will help Lisa kind of focus in some of her information today. So I wanted to jump in and have a conversation with Lisa before she kind of takes over the content. And I wanted to start by saying, you know, Lisa, how did you get interested in this field of social work and trauma-informed care?
I had to think a lot about that because when I went into social work, I said two populations I would never work in were mental health and with children. And here I am working in mental health with children. But when I started at Jefferson County Human Services, I just realized the prevalence of trauma. I started to get really interested in it, how many evidence-based practices are out there, and just kind of started and kept on going, and it's now my passion and the rewards of it, seeing someone in their resilience journey, seeing someone work so hard to achieve great things is really kind of the biggest pay that I get from it.
That's fantastic. Well, the next thing I wanted to ask is, how can your work as a therapist help teachers? And, you know, how is it different from what our teachers are doing in the classroom?
Yeah, so I always, I'm very lucky that I get to team with a lot of teachers. The individuals I work with oftentimes have very caring, very involved teachers. So it's great because as soon as I get that release of information and I can reach out to a teacher, I can offer suggestions on what we're doing in therapy in general, like some of the skills I'm going to talk about today. Teachers can implement them in the classroom for the whole class or one-on-one with kids. And I do always tell teachers that their job is leaps and bounds more difficult than mine because I am working with kids one-on-one for 1 hour a week, and teachers are working with kids 25 on one or 30 on one for 40 hours a week. So I am just always in awe of what you guys are doing. And most counselors, most therapists that I work with really, really love it when we can team with teachers.
That's wonderful. And it's true. Teachers are inspirational in so many ways in what they're able to do with our students. So again, thank you all. And then my last question before I turn over kind of the whole slideshow and PowerPoint and presentation to you is, what is rewarding about your work and what is most challenging?
Yeah, so rewarding definitely is just seeing that resilience come out. Seeing children and families in their recovery journey is just the best. The connections I make when I might see someone out in the community and they tell me how they're doing. You know, I've been working in this area for 10 years, so I've gotten to see a lot of people grow up, which is really exciting. I think most challenging is seeing the hurt and seeing the heartache, and I'm sure a lot of us can empathize with, we're all seeing kind of a lot of hurt and heartache all around our nation or all around the world right now. I would say that's most challenging, and I'm sure teachers can also agree with that because I know they see that on an everyday basis as well. So I think the challenges and the rewards for therapy really mirror a lot of probably challenges and rewards that teachers see too.
Well, thank you for sharing and kind of having that a little more of a conversational introduction. And now we're going to kind of get started with the amazing content you're going to share.
Awesome, thank you. So I just have my email address up on here. If anybody ever wanted to get a hold of me, by all means, feel free. Again, my name is Lisa Dunham, and I'm a therapist and mental health supervisor. So the first slide, or second slide here, I should say, I just had kind of some goals, what I'm hoping to discuss today. Are we able to move to that second one? There we go. I'm hopeful to discuss really briefly some of the mental health trends that you might be seeing, briefly touch on what it means to be trauma-informed. I would love to provide you with some resources for skills to use both long-term and could be implemented now, like today, maybe even in your classroom, and then also focus on compassion resilience because, like I said, I know that your jobs are both challenging and rewarding, and there's a lot out there now discussing how we can cope with our own kind of secondary or vicarious trauma based on what we're going through on an everyday basis. So those are kind of my 5 goals or objectives for today. by all means, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box as we go. I'm happy to kind of veer off in one direction or another based on what's best for the audience. So if we want to go to the next slide here, just that first section I was going to talk about is trends, mental health trends. So if we can go to the next one. I was kind of trying to think of what teachers are probably seeing in schools. What I've seen kind of from the outside or the feedback I've gotten from teachers is increased symptoms of anxiety. So that could be anything from students being more irritable to students worrying about more things to students not sleeping enough or sleeping too much. Increased symptoms of depression, that could be anything from self-harm or unfortunately on the broader end of things, suicide attempts and completed suicides. And depression can also be irritability, fatigue, falling asleep in class, things like that. We're seeing increased, I would say, trauma awareness. The trauma is not necessarily increased, although within this past month, I think that's changed a little bit, but increased awareness of trauma, which is a great thing. And on the other hand, it really begs the question, okay, now I know that it exists and I know what some of these behaviors are, what can I do about it? And then lastly, being someone that did not have social media when I was in elementary school, middle school, or high school, the social media presence and how that affects all of this. The amount of things that individuals are putting on social media or cyberbullying on social media can increase all of these mental health symptoms that I've discussed above. So if we want to go on to the next slide, this is kind of the next section here, trauma-informed practices. So anyone that's familiar with kind of the 5 principles of trauma-sensitive schools, I put them up here, and my hope is really to touch on each of these principles within this discussion today. So the prevalence of impact on trauma, viewing things from a trauma-informed lens, really using our relationships and using that connection to help build up the school and build up individuals. Caregiver capacity just refers to our own capacity to take this on. Social emotional learning, trauma-informed education is not for the weary of heart, and it takes a lot. It can be exhausting at times. So how do we continue to face that every day? And then empowerment and resiliency for children, for families, as well as ourselves. So within this discussion, I'm actually hoping to touch on all of those as well. So I'm really hoping that today's discussion in and of itself will help everyone develop their capacity to be more trauma-informed and trauma-aware. And like I said, any questions or anything that I missed on that mental health trend slide, please feel free to ask away as I'm chatting here.
Lisa, I do want to, we had a good number. Pamela, Kimberly, and Courtney all asked if there will be access to these slides. And so what I wanted to ask you is, do you mind if we send out the slides with the email that would go out in about 24 hours with their certificate that they attended today and a recording of the video?
Absolutely, no problem. Yeah, that'd be great.
We can do that. And then do you mind if I ask 2 other questions that have come in as well?
Go ahead.
Okay. Stacy asked the question, I'm a K-5 visual arts teacher, and I have a major concern about mental health of my students who are super huggy and touchy, which I am very kind and loving. But what about those COVID-19 restrictions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think even COVID-19 aside, that's a really great question. Let me back up and say from a trauma-informed perspective, I always say that I never ever touch anyone I work with without asking them first, and that's even like a pat on the back. Being a therapist, I know that's a little different than in the schools because I've seen kindergarten teachers be, mobbed by 5 and 6-year-olds. So it is a little bit different. And I think really bringing awareness and being able to set boundaries is really important. So when I start off working with an individual, especially a younger child that might want lots of hugs and things like that, I usually talk about that kind of right away in my relationship with somebody and say, oh my gosh, I just love your hugs. And sometimes what I worry about is maybe you're not in the mood to get a hug that day. What's kind of a phrase that we can use with each other to let each other know, hey, I'm not in a hug mood today. I'm more in a high five or fist bump type of mood. And I think with COVID, just being really upfront and honest, depending on how your school has handled it, as far as saying, you know what, germs are out there, and right now there's a lot of doctors and nurses that are saying that it's best not to hug. So can we do, my kids were doing with their grandparents and stuff, a lot of air hugs, virtual hugs, pretend hugs, things like that, that I think can hopefully get across to it. And as far as just being really open and honest about, you know, we really want to listen to the doctors and nurses about this. I hope that answers that. And then was there another question?
So there is one more, and
Yeah.
we asked, how can we help students who face anxiety and depressive symptoms? Which I think is something that you'll probably continue on and hit more in the webinar.
It is, yes. So I am going to focus on that specifically. So what I will say is, can you hold on to that question? And if you have specific ones as I'm going through this, we'll come back and make sure that I touch on that, okay? So if we can go on to the next slide here, which just talks about the prevalence and impact of trauma. So anyone that is interested at all in the field of trauma-informed care or trauma-informed schools, I would really, really recommend that you either read this book or watch this TED Talk, or even better, both. This is by Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. She is currently the Surgeon General of California. She wrote an amazing book, really from the medical perspective. But I love the book because it reads as both a novel and brings in a great deal of science and how to achieve being trauma informed. And her TED Talk is called How Childhood Trauma Affects Health Across a Lifetime. So if I were to ever suggest like one book on trauma, it would be hers. Of course, I have plenty of others to suggest, but the most important thing to take into account is that right now, and this really affects everyone in the audience, what we know is about 26% of kids have experienced a traumatic event by the time they turn 4. So I always think of my daughter's 4K class last year, and she had about, I'm trying to think how many kids were in her class. I think there was about 25 kids in her class. So when I went in there, I was thinking that, you know, 5 or 6 of those kids have already experienced at least one traumatic event. And that's true across all demographics, all races, all social classes, is that 26%. So trauma is impacting all of our students. If we were taking a look at the fact that 26% of kids going into 4K use wheelchairs for access, we'd sure be building a lot of ramps and a lot more elevators. So that's why I think it's important to take this into account when we're working with children and families. If you haven't ever attended a trauma-informed seminar, I would encourage you to search some out or look for some. And I'm used to presenting on trauma-informed care for about 2 to 4 hours. So trying to narrow it down into one slide was rough for me, but the main idea of being trauma-informed is really shifting from this thought of what's wrong with you. So looking at a child's behaviors and saying, oh my goodness, what's wrong with that kid? What's his diagnosis or what's going on? And asking what's happened to you. So what has happened in the past that maybe is causing some of these behaviors? The kid who maybe skips in front of the line at school lunch, rather than seeing him as a little boy with no boundaries, maybe we need to look at if there's food insecurity going on at home, and this is really his only chance for a good meal today. So the basis behind being trauma-informed in a trauma-informed lens is really taking ourselves away from that what's wrong with you and asking what's happened to you, and even better yet, what's going on here right now. So the next slide here is building into that second objective that I was talking about, which is building skills. So again, if I have one kind of book recommendation, this would be it. And I know that this is on the shelves at Nasco as well, DBT Skills in Schools. DBT stands for Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. Please don't be alarmed though at the therapy word. This book is written to just focus on what they call life skills. So the book was written by Jim Mazza and Liz Dexter Mazza, both of whom I've been lucky enough to attend trainings by. And they really focus on life skills. The thing I like about this book from a teacher perspective is it quite literally has, if you wanted to just open this book and read the script of the lesson for the day, it has that. So it gives you a lot of leeway, I guess, in how you want to teach that skill, if you want to take it and run with it yourself, or if you want to just follow this script. Many schools, at least in our area, are incorporating this curriculum into their health class, their social studies class, even their science class. And it really is focused on life skills. I'm going to get a little bit more into them, but if we're thinking of that three-tier approach to education, DBT skills in school is meant to be a tier 1. So 100% of students can receive this curriculum, and you do not need to have any sort of mental health diagnoses or even any sort of mental health struggles to benefit from the DBT skills. For the kids who are, for the teachers, I think about 50% of you are teaching younger than that middle school level. There are still a lot of skills in this book too that we can discuss, and I'm hopeful to get into a little bit today too. So if we want to go to the next slide, I'm just going to kind of run through what this book looks like. By all means, DBT Steps A or DBT Skills in Schools is not the only curriculum out there. What I will say is it's the most researched as far as incorporating DBT skills into schools. So the book is split into 5 different sections. It starts off with mindfulness, then goes to distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness, walking the middle path, and emotion regulation. So I'm going to give you guys a little taste of each of these skill sections. Even if you're not interested in the book, these 5 skill sets are things that, again, every student, every adult, everyone can learn from. For example, at my work, we do DBT lunch and learns about once a month where we're teaching the skills to our coworkers because they are so beneficial just for healthy living. So if we want to go to that next slide on mindfulness. Mindfulness is kind of a buzzword right now. We're hearing it a lot. It's, you know, on the cover of Time magazine and things like that. So if you haven't heard of it, it really is basically just paying attention to one thing in the moment and being aware. I liked this little graphic here because it focuses specifically on school and on learning. And no matter what grade I'm in, if I'm sitting at my desk thinking about my pets and my video games and TV and who put what on Snapchat and Instagram and what's going on at home, I'm not going to be taking in that math lesson, right? Versus if I'm able to kind of calm my mind, quiet pieces of my mind so that I can focus 100% on that math lesson, it's going to be more beneficial to me. This curriculum talks a lot about how, myself included, I like to, you know, brag that I'm a multitasker, and brain science shows that it's actually impossible to multitask. When we're doing 2 things at once, really our brain is flipping between those 2 things. So mindfulness is the ability to kind of calm that, focus on one thing at a time so that we can take complete advantage of our brain power and our learning power. And then the next, and there's a ton of mindfulness activities, I apologize, and I'll get into those, a few of those later that we can use as well as students. Actually, wait, if you want, I apologize, if you want to go back to that one, I think I actually did have a couple of examples. Yes, I'm sorry. So some specific examples of mindfulness. For the younger grades, I love doing what I call Spidey sense. So I do this individually or with groups. But what I'll do is I'll have a bell or a little gong, or sometimes I even use just a CD player. And kids can choose. They can either close their eyes or not close their eyes. It's very trauma-informed to always tell kids that if they're not comfortable closing their eyes, they don't have to. And Spidey sense is I take both my hands and put them down on my desk. And when the teacher rings the gong or the bell, I raise my hand. And I try to listen as close as I can, until I can't hear that bell anymore, and then I put my hand down. It's really an amazing way to get a group of kids to be really focused on the sounds in the room and focused on, obviously, I need to quiet my voice if I'm going to use my Spidey senses to hear this. Other examples of mindfulness are kind of drawing my own happy place. We call that guided imagery, but drawing my own safe place or happy place. And another example of mindfulness is really just going all in. If you can ever think of being at maybe your favorite concert, or being in the middle of a really great sports game where you're not focused on all that stuff that's going on, but you're 100% in the know. Michael Jordan, if anyone's a basketball fan, did a lot of mindfulness practice, both when he was playing as well as now. Phil Jackson, his coach, did a ton of mindfulness with the team as well. That's the way I've often gotten buy-in from some of the adolescents that I work with, talking about how it can affect our sports performance too. So that's just a little taste of mindfulness. Next slide, I apologize for that, I got ahead of myself. Distress tolerance. These are skills that we're going to want to use when our stress levels on that scale of 0 to 10 are an 8, 9, or 10. So distress tolerance are things that I can do right away to try to bring myself down. Now, I say this sarcastically, I'm sure the teachers listening have never had a student in their classroom that's been at a stress level of 8, 9, or 10. As well as maybe some of us have been teaching and had stress levels of 8, 9, or 10. So there are several distress tolerance skills. I'm just going to walk through one of my favorite. It's called the tip skill. And temperature is the first piece of this. My kids are both daycare aged, well, one's in kindergarten now, but my kids are both daycare aged. And actually, I taught this to them. They taught it to their daycare teachers, and daycare actually uses this to help kids that are having outbursts. So the temperature skill, I'm going to teach you the way it's meant to be, but I'm also going to teach you the way that we should probably do it in schools, because the way it's meant to be is to initiate our dive reflex, which means that we take a big bowl of ice water, we hold our breath, and we put our head down in that ice water. Now, please, by no means ever put a student's head in ice water. I always have to give that caveat, although I know that you guys would not. But the way that I've sort of modified this and use it with my own young kids, as well as with kids, really K through 12, is we talk about going to the nurse's office or even having one of those break apart ice packs in your room. And students can either, it's most effective if they can put their heads down, but putting that ice pack below my eyes right here or on the back of my neck. The reason that this works is that when I'm really, really stressed out, my heart rate goes up, obviously. My heart rate and my breathing go up. When something really cold hits right down here, the nerve endings below my eyes or the back of my neck, as well as when I put my head down and hold my breath, it initiates what's called the dive reflex. What the dive reflex does is it sends a message to my brain saying, holy cow, we just jumped into some really cold water. We don't know when we're coming up for air yet. We need to slow down our heart and our breathing. And the dive reflex automatically slows down our heart rate and our breathing. So I don't know if you've ever tried to tell anyone to just calm down or tell anyone to take deep breaths. It doesn't always work the best. The dive reflex, I like to explain to kids, kind of tricks our brain and our body into calming down for us. The other parts of the tip skill focus on intense exercise. So when my heart rate is really high, it might seem counterintuitive, but if I get out and do a bunch of jumping jacks or run around the track a few times, it'll keep my heart rate up here, and then when I stop, it'll kind of bring it down. So another thing that we sometimes do is getting out and doing some exercise with some kids. Paced breathing is, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of square breathing or starfish breathing. Square breathing is where I kind of draw a square on a piece of paper, and I just breathe in and trace it up, hold it, breathe out and trace it down, hold it. And I just kind of keep doing those squares. Starfish breathing is something I usually talk to those K through 8 kids about, where we make a starfish with our hands. We also call it roller coaster breathing, and we breathe in to take the roller coaster up and down to take it down, in, out. So those are ways. There's plenty of paced breathing apps out there. Going back really quickly to, well, actually any of the distress tolerance skills, it's really fun too. I have an app on my phone that can take heart rates. Plenty of kids have their smartwatches now. What we'll do is we'll take someone's heart rate when they're pretty stressed out. We'll do one of these skills and then take their heart rate again, and we call it beating your score. If your heart rate decreases, then we know that it was helpful in relaxing your body. And then the very last one on here is PMR, or progressive muscle relaxation. And that is just tensing and relaxing my muscles kind of. I start at my toes and do each muscle group at a time all the way to the top of my head and then go back down. Again, I'm doing my best just to give really quick tastes of these things, so I apologize if I'm going very fast. These are just one of the skill sets in DBT Steps A as well as just in general.
Lisa, I also wanted to ask a question. So Shauna asked, what is the spelling of that reflex that you mentioned to calm down?
Oh, the dive reflex, just D-I-V-E, just like I am diving underwater.
Okay, wonderful. And then also Elizabeth asked, what about conscious discipline?
Can you extrapolate on it a little bit more? Like if I find that conscious discipline is helpful?
The question that Elizabeth typed in was just, what about conscious discipline?
Yeah, so what I will say is conscious discipline takes in, if I'm thinking of it in the right context, so correct me if I'm wrong, but from my perspective, conscious discipline takes into account where I'm at, my own regulation, and we're actually going to talk about that in a little bit too. It is a lot of mindfulness for myself when I'm working with a student or when I'm engaging in any sort of disciplinary action for a student. So absolutely, that would, again, if I'm thinking of it correctly, would fall in line with what we're talking about here.
Okay, wonderful. And then there's a few more questions, but I'm going to save them to the end because they're kind of bigger questions rather than the ones about this slide. So
perfect. Okay. Yes. The next slide focuses on interpersonal effectiveness. Interpersonal effectiveness really is just communication skills. DBT is really big on acronyms. I know schools are big on acronyms, so is mental health, but we just all love them. But this skill is called Dear Man. The reason I like this skill is because we really can navigate it or adapt it to any age level. A younger kid might know of this as an I statement, saying, I feel this way when you do this. I love using this skill for middle and high schoolers because it quite literally gives a script for how to communicate with somebody. So I've worked with an individual before who really wanted to go, she wanted to go to kind of a big party with friends and her mom didn't want her to. So we wrote out a script, describe the situation. Mom, you really don't want me to go to this party. I really want to go. Express how you feel. I'm feeling really worried that I'm going to get left out because all my friends are going to this and I'm going to miss some fun. Assert what you want. I really would like to be able to go to this. Reinforce what you want by kind of tell another person like what they're going to get out of this. Like, gosh, I know that you're really worried I'm going to get home at 2 a.m. and not get up the next day. So I'm going to do all my Saturday chores on Friday so that I'm able to, you know, be ready to go and I can already mitigate kind of that response. And then MAN, the man part, just stands for how we can teach individuals and how we ourselves can be assertive in our requests. So being mindful, being aware of my own heart rate, my own body, how I appear. If I appear aggressive or too meek or what's going on in my own body, appear confident. This is one that the K through 8 can really focus on. Even just that A, what does it mean to appear confident? Yeah, I'm sure you guys know that age kids love the theatrics and dramatics. So does this look confident or does sitting up straight looking in your eyes look confident? And being willing to negotiate, understanding that when we're asking our teachers for something or asking our parents for something, they might say no, or they might kind of counter offer with something. So this is just another example of kind of an interpersonal effectiveness skill that we can teach. And again, my favorite thing about this is that we can quite literally come up with a script to help somebody be effective in asking for what they want. Now, the caveat with this that I always tell people is you might use the best skills in the world and still get told no. And we got to kind of find a way to live with that. So that's an example of just one of the interpersonal effectiveness skills. And then the next slide, this is, well, I say they're all my favorites, I guess, but this is another one of my favorites. This is middle path, or also referred to as thinking dialectically. I love middle path, and I really do believe that the 8 through, or I'll say 7 through 12 grades are wonderful at this. I wasn't so sure they would be, but they really are. Being able to see things from another's perspective, and middle path really means being able to see your truth in something. So myself, in dealing with my very strong-willed youngest child, she's 4 years old. And one day she had an all-out meltdown. I'm hopeful other people can relate to this because I gave her a red plate instead of a blue plate at dinner. The blue plate happened to be very dirty and in the dishwasher, which was running, so I could not get her the blue plate. And you would think the world was ending. And right then I had to make a decision. Okay, am I going to tell her, too bad, this is your life, sit here and eat this? Or am I going to try to see things from her perspective? And when I stopped and looked at it from her perspective, in that moment, the blue plate was the most important thing in her life. She didn't really care about the food. She cared a lot about the blue plate. So I could validate that she was upset. I can't validate having a tantrum and kicking and screaming. What I can say, though, is, wow, you are really upset about, really, you were hoping for the blue plate all day and you did not get it. So middle path is being able to teach a skill of someone seeing something from another's perspective. Younger kids, the way I do this is I use a lot of fairy tales. Hey, let's take a look at Beauty and the Beast from Gaston's point of view. Gaston was in love with this girl that he thought was getting hurt by a beast, and he was trying his best to save her. Or let's take a look at any of the fairy tales from the quote unquote bad guys point of view. And it's kind of fun to see what kids are able to come up with. That opens the door to a whole bunch of discussions about, okay, let's try to look at this from my perspective, or let me sit down and talk with you about what your perspective is. There's also a ton of skills as far as specifically how to apply that. If we want to move on to the next slide, if we're able. Okay. So emotion regulation skills are kind of that next skill set that we talk about. Another acronym here is ABC Please skills. I just put down the ABC skills, and I can talk about the please skills. The ABC skills, or pardon me, emotion regulation skills are things that we can use pretty much any day, every day. The stress tolerance is what we use when our stress is an 8, 9, or 10 out of 10. Emotion regulation are things that we can use when our stress is a 0 through 7 out of 10. So emotion regulation skills, I call them everyday skills, or I call them low stress skills. Basically what this comes down to is the A stands for accumulate positives. I'm sure you as teachers can relate to this, that it is so, so important from the social emotional learning as well as from the academic learning standpoint that kids need to accumulate positives in order to feel confident and comfortable and go along. So even if it's pointing out the one positive out of that really, really rough day for that student or for that family, it can be extraordinarily helpful. So again, taking our focus and focus on what's going right with you versus all the things that might be going wrong. I know IEP teachers out there, I love that we start IEPs with child strengths. So accumulating positives is really another way of looking at things from a strengths-based perspective. Building mastery means either for myself or for a student, allowing me time to feel like I'm good at something. So for me personally, my building mastery is I'm trying to learn how to crochet. And I really quickly realized that I should not start with a great big huge blanket because I did not feel like I had many positives. I did not feel like a master. So what I did was I took my big goal of making a baby blanket and I split it up into smaller goals, like learning a stitch. And I was able to build mastery on those little stitches before I moved on to something bigger. Really, this is just scaffolding learning. And I think we can see this in our own lives too. If my ultimate goal is running a marathon, I'm probably not going to be able to just get out there and do it. I need to build up to it. And helping students break up their big goals into those smaller chunks. So I would like to be a car mechanic. Boils down to, okay, let's see what the steps you need to take to get there and what can we do today to get you closer. Breaking that down into even those minuscule day-to-day steps. And then the C in ABC Please stands for cope ahead. What this means is if I have something stressful coming up like a math test, I'm going to make my cope ahead plan. So that means I'm going to decide ahead of time. When I walk into math class that day, I'm going to sit down, get my pencil out, get my calculator out, and take 3 deep breaths. Or unfortunately for some of our students that are dealing with a lot more difficult things within their home or within their neighborhood, we have some students right now that unfortunately are sort of needing to make cope ahead plans with their teachers, therapists, caregivers about what to do when they go outside and there's community violence going on, or what to do when they get approached by somebody who's asking them an inappropriate question. So the C just stands for taking a look at my coping skills, what might be going on, and how can I already have a plan in place. In this acronym, ABC, please, oh, if we can just, sorry. In the acronym ABC, please, the please stands for skills that we would think are going without saying. Sometimes they're not though. So the PL in please stands for physical illness, which just means I really need to treat it. If I'm physically ill, if I have a cold or a cough, I need to focus on getting well from that. Or if I have type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes, I need to be taking my blood sugars in order to maintain my own emotional regulation. The E in please stands for balance my eating. So watching what I eat, that's why I said this goes along really well with a lot of the health class curriculums and gym class curriculums. The A stands for avoiding mood altering drugs. The S stands for balancing my sleep, and the E stands for exercise. So again, a lot of these skills can really be broken down into that younger age group, even though it was described for that middle to high school. We can focus on what our nighttime routine is for younger kids, or our exercise routine, and how that not only helps your body and your heart, but your brain. Now we can move on. I was hopeful to give you guys some easy skills to implement now. Whenever I attend a training, my hope is that I can walk away with something I can do right away. These skills are skills that you can either teach students or you can use yourself. Excuse me. So grounding skills, I always tell kids it's not grounding like you're grounded to your room, but grounding skills are things that if I'm stressed out, they just kind of help to bring me back to calm. So let's see here. Jenny, are you still able to hear me? If I put you on the spot, can you do something?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So Jenny, we're going to do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 skill right now.
Okay.
And you don't need to have your camera on or anything like that, but Jenny, if you can look around the room right now and tell me 5 things that you see, any 5 things.
Okay, so I have lights, I have a microphone, I have a stand, I have a weighted dog, I have a phone, and a water bottle.
Perfect. All right, so then Jenny, if you can just tell me 4 things that you can feel either on your body, like your shirt touching your skin, or in your body, like I can feel my heartbeat right now. 4 of those.
So I can feel, the pants, I have my hand on there. I can feel my breaths kind of going in and out. I can feel the other desk that I have my other hand on, and I can feel my heartbeat.
Awesome. Now, if you can just tell me 3 things that you can hear right now.
I can hear you talking to me. I can hear kind of the buzz of the air conditioning, and I can hear myself talking.
Awesome. And then if you can, this one gets a little harder. 2 things that you can smell right now or that you could smell. I always tell kids like my hair conditioner is one of them.
Yeah. So I would say probably like the air conditioner. And then, yeah, smell is harder.
I know, it's harder. Sometimes I have little scent samples for kids to use for that one. And then lastly, tell me 1 thing you taste or 1 taste you notice in your mouth right now.
So I had kind of a mint before I sat down for this webinar, so I think I can still taste kind of the hints of that.
Perfect. So that's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 skill. That is just taking all of our senses and kind of getting ourselves grounded. If I'm stressed out, oftentimes I'm not really in my head, right? Like I'm focused either on what's going to happen or what's already happened. Grounding myself to my 5 senses can be very, very helpful. For those younger kids that might not be able, that can be pretty tough to go through those. I might say, hey, can you point to 4 purple things in the room right now? Or can you find 3 green things in the room right now? Same concept, just adapted a little bit for that younger age group. Square and starfish breathing, I had already gone through with the mindfulness. That's just that being able to relax my breath and calm my breath. Asking questions or doing things slightly below developmental level. When I am very, very stressed out, I'm probably not able to remember quadratic equations. For me personally, I'm someone who, when I'm stressed, I like to do things like Sudoku puzzles or color mandalas or something like that. This works for all age groups. Trying to have kids kind of go through lists can sometimes be calming. So for my very young child who's 4, I'll often ask her in the midst of kind of her being upset, or if she fell and scraped her knee, I'll say, oh, can you help me? I can't remember the characters in Paw Patrol. What are the 4 characters? For kids that are older, that are in high school, I've had individuals that really liked music, and oftentimes they would kind of like go through guitar chords in their head when they were stressed out. So again, it's nothing that is super difficult to recall, but it's something that I can easily recall to kind of bring my brain back down. When I'm stuck in that emotion mind, it brings me back into that logical mind. And then lastly, using an object to ground. So I don't have one with me now, but I have little stones that I hand out to individuals that they can keep in their pocket. Worry stones work well for this. I also hand out little wax scent samples. I have a friend that gave me a ton of them. People keep those in their pocket to just kind of hang on to, or they kind of look like chapsticks, so they'll take them out and smell them to kind of calm their senses. Some kids might have a favorite blanket or a favorite sweatshirt, and maybe we can just cut a little corner of that blanket. Or I've worked with kids who had a favorite hoodie, and they would just kind of touch that hoodie when they were stressed out. Doing anything to kind of bring me back to grounding. Most of these things are things that you or I could do without someone knowing. I could do my 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 skill and no one would know I was doing it. So I could do it in class and nobody would really notice. Or I can lead someone else in doing it. So those are the grounding skills. I wanted to go to this next slide, and this is a little bit about that, I believe, that conscious discipline thing. A dysregulated adult will never regulate a dysregulated child. I believe this goes without saying, and I think it's something that really, really everyone, myself included, needs to be mindful of. Oftentimes, when I am very, very stressed out, the children that I work with are the first ones to recognize it before my coworkers, before anyone else. Even if I'm not stressed out at that specific child, I had my second child that was born was a really rough sleeper. And whenever I went to work the next day and I did not have a lot of sleep the night before, the kids I worked with would point out right away, Miss Lisa, you are very tired today, aren't you? So kids can read our emotions. And if we're upset, frustrated, and kind of in our emotion mind, we are not going to help someone regulate. So some of the techniques, the grounding techniques, the mindfulness techniques, the great thing about it is if I'm standing in front of a class of 25 kids and I say, hey, everybody, I think we all need to do a grounding skill right now. Let's do our 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 skill. You're coaching them in doing it to regulate themselves, but you're also doing it for yourself to regulate yourself. Students can only benefit from this. You're modeling healthy behavior. Even if you don't want to say, hey, I'm dysregulated right now and need a break, you can just say, hey, class, sounds like we all need a regulation break right now. It is hugely, hugely beneficial in getting my own body regulated too when I'm doing that along with a student. So I need to maintain my calm in order to help coach someone else in being calm. So the next slide, I do have some mindfulness and regulation for us. If you Google loving kindness meditation, it's probably one of my favorites, and it's one that I've been using a lot actually recently due to the state of affairs that are going on. Loving kindness is just a gradual step-by-step sending out kindness into the world. It's a really awesome meditation. You can do it in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 20 minutes. I would encourage people to look at it. Sometimes I do it at the start of my day to just kind of get ready for the day. Paced breathing is that square breathing, or like I said, there are breathing apps that work really well. I encourage anyone who doesn't have a strategy for leaving work at work to do so. I know teachers, you guys, you do not just leave work at 3:30 and you're done. I know y'all bring it home and everything like that. I'm guilty of the same. And being able to recognize where that shut-off valve is. So I'm gonna put my laptop in the laundry room where I'm not gonna see it for the whole night, or whatever it might be, developing a strategy for that. Me, when I pull into, if I don't have work to do at home, when I pull into my driveway, I just kind of do a deep breath, and that is me leaving my work behind. Mindfully eating. How many of us have eaten? I just did this, eaten my lunch in front of my computer, and I have no clue what I ate after I ate it or how much I ate. Mindful eating is just focusing on that meal in that moment. Paying attention to what we enjoy. Oftentimes I'm doing a task I really like, but I'm so focused on everything else that I'm not actually paying attention to what I enjoy. So I would challenge anybody who enjoys taking walks or playing cards with your kids. Tonight, try to do that and just do that. Just be in that moment and focus on the enjoyment of it. We all know that venting with coworkers is needed and helpful, and venting with an end game in sight. So I might vent to my coworker and say, oh man, I just need 5 minutes to just vent and tell you how I'm feeling. After that 5 minutes, I'm gonna need you to cut me off and we're gonna need to problem solve from there. So venting is one thing that's really beneficial, and having that end game or that boundary in sight for it. The last couple I'm gonna go through here, compassion resilience. This was designed, we can go to the next slide. This was designed by Rogers in Health. This is a free resource. They designed these compassion resilience toolkits specifically to people in the helping professions that are struggling with vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, and how to just kind of get through our days of helping 25 kids on a regular basis, and we're not sure what they're going home to and things like that. They developed 3 specific toolkits. One is just for teachers and educators. So this is free online. It's meant to be done kind of in a group format, but it's amazing. You can sort of cherry pick what you want to do. I've known lots of educators and human services professionals that are kind of the second group they rolled this out for. We're doing this at my work. It gives a great ability to kind of develop my own compassion resilience and really work on being able to have those boundaries and ultimately not burn out, because this is a tough job that you all do. The free compassion resilience toolkit is also, the third one out there is out there specifically for parents. So I would encourage anyone to make use of that. It's an amazing free resource. And then my last slide here, I believe my last slide is I tried my best to compile some of the resources I've been talking about. So I have Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris's TED Talk and book on here. Ross Green is another amazing resource who wrote recently Raising Human Beings and also wrote Lost in School. I have the Compassion Resilience Toolkit on here. Collaborative problem solving, which is kind of what Ross Green started out with, and then Stu Ablon kind of, I guess, intersected, and they kind of went their separate ways. But Stu Ablon and Bruce Perry talk about regulate, relate, reason. And that just comes down to that, unless I'm regulated, I'm not going to be able to regulate a student. And kind of my 3 objectives when trying to calm a student are: first, I need to regulate them. Second, I need to relate and tell them I understand what's going on. And then third, I need to move to problem solving or reasoning with them. If I try to move to problem solving too quick, I'm not going to get very far. I've got DBT in Schools on here, and actually DBT in Schools is doing Facebook Live every day during COVID. Liz Dexter Mazza and Jim Mazza are married and have 3 kids of their own, and they do these Facebook Live videos where they teach the skills to their own kids, which is really awesome, and teach skills to parents too. They're all archived as well on Facebook. So that's kind of what I had for today. I apologize, it's 1:54. I want to leave time for questions, and Jenny, for you to discuss as well.
Yeah, I wanted to talk very, very briefly about some of the product that NASCO has that reinforces what you were just sharing. So the first thing I wanted to share is that NASCO does offer that book, that DBT Skills in School, schools that Lisa spent a good amount of time kind of breaking down some of the great information in there, but it's jam-packed with just amazing resources. So just so you're aware, it is available at NASCO. And then I also wanted to share kind of the 3 other things that have been sitting on my desk as I'm talking. One, for kind of mindfulness reasons. The weighted cuddly companion is a heavy stuffed animal that is really nice to put on kind of especially a K to 2nd grader's lap to give them kind of some of that weight, some of that comforting feeling. And it really is a really nice plush. And then we also have mindfulness cards and these decision-making cards as well that kind of really focus on what could be those trigger points, and then making sure that you are being mindful, like Lisa was talking about. But I want to maximize the amount of time we have for these questions. So I'm going to turn to some of the bigger questions that came in, Lisa, while you were talking. So the first one I wanted to bring up is that Pamela asked, what will we do when students get scared about others sneezing or coughing, or even some of our teachers who are also kind of very scared of this COVID-19 atmosphere?
Yeah, wow, what a great question. I would, in terms of obviously specifics to it, I would rely on what your school's policy and procedure is in terms of hand washing and things like that. There are so many amazing resources out there specific to COVID. Jenny, I could always email you some of the free resources I've found as far as really cool coloring pages, things like that. Sesame Street came out with something awesome recently. They also just last night came out with something in relation to the George Floyd killing and the protests that are going on right now, it was really incredible and helpful. The number one thing I think is being able to recognize and validate that this is confusing. It can be scary. We know that this virus is out there. That can be a scary thing. And when someone coughs or sneezes, that might make my body feel a little bit scared. And guess what? We're following the doctor's directions about washing our hands. And me as your teacher, I'm sanitizing the classroom every day. So we're doing all those things that the doctors and the nurses who are super smart are telling us to do. Number one, though, I think we call it name it to tame it. We have to say, yeah, that can be scary sometimes. It's okay to feel scared, and here's what we're going to do about it.
Thanks. That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to jump to kind of another really big question as well. That's, I think, going to be a hard one. And the question comes in from Amber, who said, I'm not sure if you'll touch on this, but do you have any resources that relate to the current racial tensions? I'm just thinking of my students who experience racial trauma and how to help other students understand that.
Absolutely. Yes. So like I just said, Sesame Street just came out with something. They have some great resources. Really, again, the biggest piece of that is education and having diverse books, diverse learning. I know NASCO, you guys have a lot of diversity in what you provide. Kind of the base foundation is having these things on hand to be able to explain and go through. And again, I'm all for being honest with my own kids as well as the kids I work with at work, and being able to say, gosh, you know what? I don't fully understand it either. It's confusing too, and it's scary too. And here are things we can do. We can spread kindness. We can write letters to our friends, our family. If we have a classmate that we want to ask questions to, let's make sure we kind of talk about it together, and let's make sure that we're taking into account everybody's feelings and where they're at. So I think, again, name it to tame it, be able to relate and say, yeah, I hear you, I got this too. And what I know is we're all going to try to work on this together. I'm hopeful I'm answering these okay. Usually I'm able to dialogue more, so I apologize.
It's harder to answer some of these questions when you're speaking to the board, right?
Yes.
You can't read the room in the same way. So really quick, we only have about a minute left, but I wanted to ask the question that Jean asked, that a couple of people asked as well, which is, do you have any suggestions on mom and dad going from relationship to relationship, and especially how that kind of has an effect on stability at home?
Oh boy, that's a good one. In a minute. Okay, let me try to think really quick. boy, I wish I had more time. I really think asking kids where they're at with it is number one. What do you think? You know, mom introduced me to a new friend last night. Gosh, what do you think about that? Really being able to have an open dialogue about most of this is the most important piece, and being able to be a safe, non-judgmental person. So rather than us kind of rolling our eyes and saying, oh boy, again, being able to say, hey, what do you think about that? And if the kid says, gosh, I don't like it, being able to reflect back, you're right, it is really hard to be in a situation where you don't like what the grown-ups are doing. How can I help? What can I do to help you right now? Do we need to do something to get back into our green zone for learning today?
Well, that is all the time we have. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing all your knowledge. And we hope that all of our attendees come to additional webinars. Like I said, we have a regular schedule of webinars, so please join us again. And we hope that you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.